If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe. But that kinetic hatred is there. And then when they see me, a person who just is responding to the arguments that missionaries make, they explode with rage against me. Why are they so angry at me? They're angry at me because it's all this pent-up rage.
Moving into this caller. Caller, you are live on the air. Please tell us your name. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
I'm Jeffrey Knox, calling from Ohio.
Welcome, Jeffrey. Go ahead with your call. What's your question?
Well, so my question has to do with Matthew 2:3. It says that King Herod, along with all of Jerusalem, were troubled, hearing the news that the Messiah was born. And it doesn't make sense. It makes sense to me that King Herod would be upset because he's not a Davidic king. But all of Jerusalem being upset, especially with Bar Kokhba, it seems like it disproves it right there.
This is the infancy narrative in Matthew. Why would Matthew's infancy narrative portray Herod as worried, and all of Jerusalem also found the whole notion that the King of the Jews was born in Bethlehem? Like, why would that be? So you'll start to taste where this is going. So Herod, the king of the Jews, he wasn't really a Jew. He's an Idiomite, but he was a puppet for Rome, and Jerusalem, meaning the Jews. Everyone was worried about this whole notion. Why would that be? Why would that be in the story? Tell me this, my friend. That's how Jews react to the notion that the Messiah was born in Bethlehem. How did Gentiles, in Matthew's view, respond to the idea that the King of the Jews, the Messiah, was born? Like Herod and the rest of Jerusalem, or differently? The answer is very differently. Whereas Herod and the Jews found it very disconcerting because they are, and this is like a setup for the passion narratives, just like later on, the Jews want to kill Jesus and they want to destroy him and destroy his message all the way through. The Gentiles love him and they worship him. And those fellows who are following a star from the east, notice that they stop off the star that they're able to follow, the magic star with GPS, stops off in Herod's palace. That's the context there. And they inquire, where is the Messiah supposed to be born? The Jews tell them Bethlehem, based on a flawed verse, because it's a made-up story. And these people, who I presume are from Persia, that's how the story is set. They go off to Bethlehem. The star continues Bethlehem and stops over the home of Jesus, right? No barn in Matthew. And they worship the newborn baby Jesus. And what does Herod do? He seeks to kill the kid. He orders that every baby boy under the age of 2 is executed. Well, that's quite striking. So what do we have here? The Gentiles love Jesus and the Jews hate him. And the King of the Jews hates him. Don't you get what's going on? So this is a setup. It's a setup for how blind the Jews are. Matthew is a rather late book in the Christian canon, probably authored in the 80s. But we can go to the earliest book, the earliest surviving literature in the Christian canon, 1 Thessalonians, no doubt from the hand of Paul, chapter 2, verse 14 through 16, which holds the Jews uniquely accountable for Jesus' death. We can go to the passion narratives, Matthew 27:25. The Jews say we take his death upon ourselves and our children. What's going on here? So Matthew 2, this is the second chapter of the infancy narrative, is a setup. And the setup is that the Jews hate Jesus, they're enemies of God, and consistently reject him, although the message was sent to them, Matthew chapter 10. And ultimately, just like they reject him as just a baby, you know how this plays to the Christian mind? You know, little Christian children read these stories. They're very easy to read. They read well. This is not like trying to make sense out of Romans 11. This is very easy to read. So this is showing that the Jews are the enemies of God. I mean, this is why Christians curse me all day. Why do they curse me? Because they read this literature. Could you imagine the pent-up anger that Christians have? All their lives they're reading these wonderful stories, and there's a pent-up anger in their heart against the Jew. Many of them are told that you shouldn't hate Jews, but it's burning in them. Look at these Jews, how they're behaving. No, the normal ones, I presume, who especially, hold back and don't say out loud what they're really thinking, or it's there, even if they're Christian Zionists. But that kinetic hatred is there. And then when they see me, a person who just is responding to the arguments that missionaries make, they explode with rage against me. Why are they so angry at me? Why not atheists? They're angry at me because there's all this pent-up rage. And Matthew 2 does nothing to alleviate that rage. And that's why it's Herod that's upset, it's Jerusalem that's upset, and ultimately Herod wants to kill the kid, and the child has to run off to Egypt with the family in Matthew 2:13-15 to escape the wrath of Herod. It's a nightmare. And in fact, when they return after Herod's death, they can't even go back to Judea. And Joseph is told, you got to go to Nazareth, which is in the Galilee, because you got another nut job, Herod Archelaus. So that's what Matthew 2 is like the book cover. The front of the book, the Jews reject Jesus and the Gentiles accept him. And the end of the book, the Jews reject Jesus and the Gentiles adore him. And how does Matthew end? It ends with the Great Commission. Go to all nations, right? And baptize them in the name of the Father. All nations. The veil has been rent asunder, has been torn in half. What's that veil torn in half? It's not a historical story. The veil is the separation between Jew and Gentile. But the book of Matthew is a story about how initially Jesus came for the Jews. The Jews wanted nothing to do with it because they're accursed, because they're enemies of God. They always will be enemies of God. And now the message of Jesus is to everyone. Now you understand that all these Christian anti-Semites are not crazy. I understand them completely. In fact, that Christians their anti-Semitism is limited, but they just occasionally want to kill us, is, I think, to their credit, given the screed that they read. And that's why pastors and preachers get up on their pulpits in the United States and in Europe and talk about how the Jews are engaging in conspiracies constantly. Where do they get it from? And why do their parishioners receive these beautiful messages so willingly? Because it comports perfectly with the gospel portrayal of the demonic Jew. This is what we're up against. There's a day coming when the Gentiles will come to us. 10 will grab the shirt of the Jew and say, take us with you, because now we know that God is with you. Zechariah 8:23. Thank you so much for your question. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא ועת נעשה בחפצו כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה